In this video, we're going to go behind the scenes and learn about some of the people I've unexpectedly met during my travels. Welcome everyone, I'm Mark, and this is the Average Me channel. If you're new to the channel, I'm going to ask that you subscribe by clicking my face down there in the corner, and when you do, don't forget to ring the bell icon up above. That way you'll know when I post new videos. In this video, what we are going to do is have a bit of a retrospective. Travel is being curtailed, flights are being canceled, hotels are being shut down in light of what's happening in the world right now. So I thought it'd be fun to take a look back, but rather than do your typical retrospective, I want to look specifically in this video at interesting people I've met during my travels. I'm going to keep it to roughly the past year. And these are people I had no intention of meeting, but they have somehow enriched either my videos or just my life through meeting these folks. And I want to start out in the Everglades of Florida. The day that I made my Skunk Ape video, I had no intention, I didn't even know that the Skunk Ape Museum existed. So what's a skunk ape? Well, a skunk ape is Florida's version of Bigfoot. So let me tell you what happened that day. I was going out looking for dolphins and alligators. And that was my whole intent. I was going to make a video of dolphins and alligators, and that's what we ended up doing. We also got some of the tortoises from Marco Island, some other things in there. But while I was heading down the road, I saw a Skunk Ape Museum, and I thought, this has got to be good. Well, the interesting part of this was meeting Dave Sheely. So let's take a look at Dave.
I'm Dave Sheely. I'm a lead skunk ape researcher here in the Big Cypress Preserve. And this is my gift shop. We sell t-shirts and stuff, keeps the lights on. We also have an animal exhibit. We have one of the largest snakes in the world in captivity. It was just measured by Ripley's last week.
Now, background information. A lot of times you go into these places with a camera and they kind of look at you funny, or they tell you they don't want you videotaping. This situation was just the opposite. This guy comes up to me with a bald head, no shirt. I had no idea who he was. And he started chatting with me. Then he introduced himself as Dave Sheely, who owned this gift shop and museum. And I've got to tell you, as you watch this video, and I will link to all the videos, you'll see he's just a passionate guy, and his passion is the Everglades, and in particular, the skunk ape. And he just came up to me, started chatting. I said, can I put you on camera? He said, absolutely. It turns out that he was no novice, that there have been many television shows on channels like, I think, National Geographic and Discovery and things of that nature, because he is a foremost expert in the skunk ape. And he so kindly took me back into his live reptile museum that most people have to pay for, and he shared his insight into the skunk ape. And, you know, it was interesting. I have to say, I am not really a true believer in Bigfoot and all the variations. And Dave was pretty open about this, and he said that, you know, he's talked to a lot of experts and zoologists. Some of them think it may be orangutans, and he was quite open to that. So he wasn't really a conspiracy person. He was just sharing with me his thoughts and his experiences. And my hat's off to Dave. Next, we're going to Alberta, Canada. Now, I have a friend in Alberta, and we just were going to go out to dinner, and I thought I'll take my camera and we'll look around the town. So that's what we were doing, and he said, oh, I want to take you to a magic show tonight. And a number of his friends were performing in this small magic show at a nightclub, a comedy club. And it was totally unexpected, so the video doesn't look polished and professional, but it is really a cool video. There's a delightful young woman who is an escape artist, and then after the event, we all sat down and we had a couple of drinks, and all the performers came over, and I was able to meet them. And unexpectedly, that became a really popular video, relatively speaking, you know, several thousand views, and every week, a couple of hundred more people find that video and go and watch it. So that was just interesting and unexpected to sit down with all the performers who were on the bill that night. the resting place of the Titanic victims. This one was so special to me. First of all, Halifax, Nova Scotia is one of my favorite cities. People always ask, well, what is a favorite place to visit? And the real answer is it's hard to pick a favorite because your favorite tends to be the place you've never been to. There's a lot of cities I like, Seattle, San Francisco, New York is certainly a favorite of mine. Any place near water, so I like it when I go to New England, when I go to Florida. But, I could go on and on and on. Hawaii, I love Alaska, but Nova Scotia, and particularly Halifax, is a very favorite place of mine. I love the city of Halifax. Now, Halifax was the closest city during the Titanic, the sinking of the Titanic, and many, if not most, of the victims were buried there. So I thought, well, this will be interesting. Now, I probably have a bigger interest in history than the average bear, but nevertheless, I thought this would just be interesting, and I went to this cemetery. No idea what I would find. I didn't know where the graves were, anything like that. I wandered. I did a little research, and I found some interesting stories about the Great Explosion, which I think I'll do a story on one day. And then suddenly, like it's one of those, oh, duh, how did I miss this? There was a big sign. This sign had to be 2 feet square, 3 feet square, and it said Titanic Victim Resting Place. So they had a certain part of the cemetery. And I wandered over, and I'm starting to do some recording. And there were some people off to the side, and they were looking at me, and they were tending to some of the graves. And I thought, oh, am I going to get in trouble? Is this considered disrespectful? Sometimes you don't know the proper etiquette when you're at these places. And I met Dee Ryan Meister. She came up to me, was friendly as can be. She introduced herself as a president of the Titanic Society. They looked after the graves. In this particular cemetery, the only people that are really allowed to be caretakers are immediate family members. That's my understanding anyway. And they've got special permission to look after the graves of the Titanic victims. And she was so delightful. And if you go and watch this video, you can see not only did she go tombstone by tombstone and share the history of each of these people. And it really brought this tragedy to life because these were no longer just 20 graves or whatever. Each one of them was a real person who had a real history, and they had a name. And it was so fascinating to hear, well, this person was in the band and they played the violin, and this person was a crew member, and this person had the child with them. And it was heart-wrenching, but at the same time it was so fascinating. And then after she was done showing me all this, Dee said, there is a bigger cemetery where many more of the Titanic victims were laid to rest. Let me show you. The sun was coming down, and they went out of their way to drive me across town. I followed their car, and then she walked me through the second cemetery. You can see all of this on the video. And Dee is just such a delightful person, and just one of those fortuitous things that you never expect to meet somebody like this. A funny thing about that day, my battery was running out on my phone. When I'm traveling, now Halifax is not a huge city. I know the basic layout, but when I'm traveling to places I don't know, I really rely on my cell phone to get me around. And for whatever reason, I think the car didn't have a charging port in it, and I didn't have a battery with me, and my phone went dead. I'm thinking, how am I going to find my way back to my hotel? Because it was on the other side of the bay. It was in Dartmouth, actually, is where I was staying across the water from Halifax. And they just told me, just go up, turn right. And fortunately, I found it. But that was really a fun and interesting day and great opportunity to meet some wonderful people. And on to Walt Disney World. I have a couple of stories to tell you about Disney World. I was at the Skipper Canteen. I was having dinner with my wife, and one of the cast members approached me. And he wasn't a wait staff, but he looked like someone who kind of, I don't know what the jobs are there, but he was sort of managing or directing the dining room. And he came up to me and introduced himself, Skipper Scott, and he said that he watched my channel. And that's really cool. And if anyone ever runs into me, I know I don't have that big of a channel, but please feel free to come up to me. And he said, as soon as you're done eating, I'd like to give you a tour. And he did. Unfortunately, the sound wasn't that great because there was such a murmur in the dining room. You can't hear all of the jokes, but he did a fantastic job. And he did all of the lines just perfect. Pointed out the unusual things I never would have noticed at Skipper Canteen at the Magic Kingdom. And I feel like I made another friend with Skipper Scott. Now, on a, not the same trip, but kind of a similar situation, and this is going to be kind of a weird one, because I'm not going to tell you the name of the people I met, because quite frankly, I don't think they want their names out there. But let me tell you what was happening. I was eating at my favorite location in Magic Kingdom, and that's Harbor House. And what I always like to do, you know, you're beat, you're worn out, you're hungry, you're tired. I like to go to Harbor House, get my meal, and I always sit at the same area and, if possible, the same table. I like to go to that overpass where you can see all the people coming down from Fantasyland and heading into Liberty Square. So it's right between, I guess it would be sort of Haunted Mansion, and then on the other side would be Peter Pan and Small World. It's kind of in between there. And I just like sitting there and eating because you can see all the people as they're coming and going, just do some people watching and relax. Well, a couple came up to me, a man and a woman, and they said, "Are you Mark from Average Me?" And I said, "Yeah." And they introduced themselves. And the reason I don't want to give their names is I think they just want to be kind of anonymous. But they operate the website Mouse and Castle. And at that time, the website wasn't even up. And if you go to the website, you will not see their names anywhere. On their business card is not their names. I know their names, but I'm not sure they want to be known. So if you're watching this, please let me know down below if it's okay to share your names. But they were so nice and so kind. And I feel very special because if you go to their website, the whole thing is just about vloggers of Disney. And you will see some of the people that I watch, like Justin Scard and Adam the Woo and Jackie at Super Enthused and Eleanor Dreaming and all those guys. And right up there is my little cartoon face, and it makes me feel kind of special. But you know, they're just wonderful people that want to operate a site just because they love Disney. And so they feature all of these vloggers. And one day I was waiting to do the tour, Marcelina to Magic Kingdom, something like that. It's a tour about Walt Disney's life. And the tour didn't start for a while. It was early in the morning. And they were just getting the Main Street vehicles out. So I thought, well, I'll take a ride. So I got on this vehicle. It was kind of like the open truck. It was a fire truck is what it was. And I was the only one in it, and I'm driving up Main Street and down, and Main Street was almost empty. And someone yelled, "Hey, Mark!" And I looked back, and sure enough, it was the fine people from Mouse and Castle. Which brings us to Phoenix, Arizona, all the way across the country, and one of the most unusual private yards I think I've ever come across. And the man who owns it is named Don Parks, and he is a collector of just about everything. What attracted me to his yard was the Muffler Man. Those of you who watch my channel know I have a fascination with Muffler Men. They are those fiberglass advertising pieces from the early 60s. Maybe late 50s, and they stand 20, 30, 35 feet tall. And originally they held mufflers. They're huge. They would hold mufflers as advertising. He had one in his yard. That's what attracted me, but it didn't stop there. He had everything imaginable. He had Sinclair dinosaurs, and he had, you know, the Bob's Big Boys, and road signs, and it was beyond belief. And as I'm there filming, who pulls up but a guy in a pickup truck filled with stuff, and he gets out, he introduces himself as Don Parks, the owner of this place. He didn't shoo me away. He, you know, opened himself up to an interview, and he said, by the way, that's my place across the street too. He bought a second house just to store more stuff. It is unbelievable. You gotta see this video to believe it. He was so kind and so generous. He not only told me about things in the yard, told me his history, he took me into both houses and showed me what was inside. Fascinating stuff, fascinating man. Most of the stuff you see is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much stuff that I never even put out there because the videos would be hours and hours long. But Don Parks was just one of those fascinating people I had no intention of meeting. And lastly takes us to Route 66 and Uranus Fudge. It is a tourist stop just off of Route 66, just off of the highway. And it has just a lot of shops and things. You can see the video, but what I want to talk about here is the sideshow. They had a sideshow. It was under construction because it was being moved. Give you a little bit of history. Some of you already know this if you watch a channel that I do have a small background with the circus and the sideshow. Sideshow people are an interesting breed. Typically, historically, there are two types of sideshow people. There are the human oddities, which were routinely referred to as the freaks, and there are the working acts. The working acts is what I would have fallen into, you know, the sword swallows, the fire eaters, the magicians, the people that do things. And here is a little view of me doing some fire eating on Bourbon Street down in New Orleans. So anyway, when I went in here, and you will see that I met a woman named Kat. And she would have been a combination of the maid freak and the working act because she did sword swallowing and then she had all the tattoos. So things like tattooed men and tattooed ladies would be what they called the maid freaks. And they are usually very closed off. Nice people, but they don't really open themselves up to outsiders. But once they find out that you were part of the inside, and it's not an easy thing, but they'll talk to you and, oh, you drop a few names or you talk about your experiences, or I didn't this time, I rarely do, but if I might show them a picture of me doing fire eating, that would open the door, and they are the most generous, interesting, open people that you want to come across. So I started having this conversation, and just out of nowhere, Kat said, would you like me to do sword swallowing? And she was kind enough to do sword swallowing on camera for us. So that was one of those unexpected things that I was able to share with you on my videos. So that wraps it up for me. I'd like to do more of these types of videos since I'm not going to be able to do travel for the next weeks and maybe even months. I thought it'd be interesting to look back and give you some behind the scenes at videos and travels that I've done and tell you a little bit about the stories that you don't see online. If you like these, let me know down below. Please like and share the videos. If you're not already subscribed, click my face in the corner and ring the bell icon up above. That way you'll be notified when I post new videos. Thanks for joining me, everyone. I'm Mark, and this is the Average Me channel.